Hi, everybody. I'm here. It's Tuesday. I was on yesterday. Oh, you made a live. Good, Jan Johnson. Get out your pens and papers if you're not driving your cars. If you're driving your car, go watch it later and come back and get the information. There's a whole lot of information that I have about the changes this spring and from talking with Hogarth, my ley line tree out in front of my house. And he's got me doing several different things. I did some neurographic drawings, and which I'll show you at the end. But this is really, we are caught in such an interesting time. And sometimes I even lose track of how much fun stuff's going on. But I'm going to start with discussing ley lines. Okay, old oil painter, I understand you have some wonderful weather coming towards you. Um, we're going to talk about in sacred geometry, it starts with a line, and then it becomes the line. It starts with a dot, then it becomes a line, then the line goes around itself, creates a first circle, and then it spins out and makes all these circles. Anyway, it always ends up with this figure. It's called the seed of life, and I'm sure you've seen it. Um, and in the seed of life, it's all these little circles that just go on. It can go on to infinity if you want it to. Well, you look at this thing in sacred geometry that we understand how the energy piles up, then the energy eventually becomes a torus, Torus, and it's like a vortex that surrounds each and every one of us. But what's going to happen now for us is we're going to have this is if you took that seed of life and you put it over the earth, and it creates a lot of lines, and they seem relatively straight. And in actual fact, when they were found in the early 1900s in England, and the real idea of a ley line started in England. And I'm going to give you a little history of ley lines so you kind of understand where this science has grown. It grew into what's become a science known as biogeography, and it's how the planet works. And it started with a book published in the early 1900s called The Old Straight Lines. And they found out that along the southern part of England, starting on the west coast of Cornwall, is a place called St. Michael's Mound. And it goes all the way across in a relatively straight line to St. Mary's in a town on the most eastern coast of Britain. And what they started realizing was that all the cathedrals and all the holy sites that were along that area were along that line. And they started wondering, is there something to this? And it and people tracked it down, and we didn't have the instruments even in some cases to be able to track the energy that was going on through these lines. But these people persisted, and that's where a guy named Rory Duff comes from. But before him was a guy named John Mitchell, and he was a well-known scientist in England. And he decided this is totally valid, that the country would have cohesive energies flowing through it, and there'd be energies from the planet that we didn't understand. And he was around in the 1950s, and he virtually gave up his well-regarded scientific career proving this stuff. And he kept proving it, but people kept saying, oh, no, 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 that sounds like fairies and elves and sprites and things. And in the actual fact, it is fairies and elves and sprites and things. They understood this energy, and they stayed as long as this energy was recognized within where they lived, where they existed. They existed in the Celtic parts of England and also in southern England. And when the industrialization got too bad and people were pulled off the land, and it's kind of almost prescient. What the story in with Tinkerbell, when with Peter Pan, when they say in the stage play, when they say You have to clap your hands. She has to know that you care to exist. That's how you can revive them. Well, they're coming back too, but that's a different show. Anyway, um, and another scientist who believed in these energies and used them, and people are looking for his notes. They got stolen after he died. His little name you might know called Tesla. Elon Musk named his car after the guy, but he was a scientist who could create energy out of the ground, and he would have had us create energy that didn't require other fuel, and we could have lived without power bills. And of course, we know the sorts of folks that drove him off life stage. He died penniless, but he had some brilliant experiments. So you get a chance to learn about Tesla. He also believed in numbers having significance and meditating and all that stuff. I mean, he was really into that too. But he actually physically made these Tesla towers that would shoot out electricity. Yeah, Karen Johnson said that this can be called the flower of life. And that's another way to look at it. It's when I get to going through all the shapes and forms in sacred geometry, I'll show how they all build into that. And Tesla's numbers were 369. You're right. Anyway, ley lines kind of get a lot of attention in our continent. The ones, well, on the U.S., the ones that get the most attention are the ones in Sedona, and everybody says Sedona's a big vortex. They can find a lot of these energy lines crossing there, and the way you find them is by using your dowsing tools. You can use a pendulum, that kind of thing, or you can use dowsing rods. Yes, you can. The dowsing rods are saying yes, you can. Is Hogarth standing in a ley line? Yes, he is. If you've not tried these rods, it's very odd because you can look at a card or you can flip something, but all of a sudden those rods start moving and telling you things. When I went out to find I was told there was a ley line near my house, and I couldn't find it, and so I went. I kept saying, "Well, I'll find it someday. I'll find it someday," and I would walk around the property, and I didn't find anything that showed exceptional energy. And then I was talking to a person who does Akashic Records and is also an architect. And one of the things he does is he tries to find ley lines for people before they build their houses on that energy. It can cause you to have a certain amount of chaos. Don't worry about it, but if you want to look it up, it's out there about ley lines and houses. And I actually had a guest on my show named Tim Walter, who teaches you how to clear that kind of energy or redirect it if it is in a house. And he's in Yorkshire, England. It's very fascinating. And the way I found Tim Walter was I was tracking down a guy named Hamish Miller. And Hamish Miller took the ideas of ley lines all over the world, and they had decided that there were certain points that were like our chakra points. The planet has those. As a matter of fact, the root chakra for our planet is in Mount Shasta. And I just got a new T-shirt with Mount Shasta on it. I should have worn it today. It would have been fitting. But he started traveling all across Europe, following all the ley lines that they were beginning to identify all over Europe. And then he went to Africa. And then he went across to Australia. And he ended up in New Zealand. And there, if you put Hamish Miller, and it's like ham, like the stuff you eat at Easter, ish, ISH, Miller, you'll find a whole lot of stories and where they filmed him. They actually did documentaries of him going around the world finding these sacred sites. And it's really fascinating. So by the time I even begin to understand any of the stuff's out there, people have identified it. They've got a lot of stuff going on about it. And other places that are well known for being at the center of ley lines or vortices of energy is the one, if you're from an English background, Stonehenge. And it's full of that kind of power. And I've been to Stonehenge, and it is that kind of power. In Spain, and I'm probably going to ruin this, how to say this, but there's an island called Es Vierdre, and it's off of an area called Ibiza. And the legend is this stone just rises out of the ocean, and it's very, very tall, very, very strange looking. It's off the coast of Spain, which is the coast of Spain's a pretty place. And it has, and the legend to it is that it is the edge of what's left of Atlantis. And the weird thing about that particular area is if you're riding in a boat around there, your compasses will just spin. The closer you get to that island, the more disruptive it is. And that's not like sitting at a polar place. That's like sitting in the middle of the globe on Spain. Then there's a volcano in Maui, and it's Halikakaila, and it has it's I saw pictures of it. It's absolutely gorgeous. And in that on that volcano, they said that when you meditate, you get in there, and when they measure the earth energies, it's exactly the human heart rate. So your heart rate goes together with the mountain. All energy does not come out the same in the earth, let me tell you. And then if you get over to Mexico, and I've done a whole show on these little guys show up. And that's an alux. And an alux is a fairy in Spanish. I mean, that's what they call them. They're fairy-like, and farmers want to get them to favor their land because they claim it helps their crops grow better. And in case you think, oh, that's just another one of those myths, this is a bridge that goes from the Cancun airport to Tulum. And Tulum is a well-known vortex site in Mexico. And it's real pretty there. I've been to that part of Mexico. It is very, very pretty. And they were told that the Alux were upset because they built this highway between Cancun, which I presume, I don't know whether it's right or left, but they built a highway to connect Cancun to Tulum, but they didn't pay service to the Alux. And the first 3 highways they built just fell apart. And it really caused all kinds of furor. And so finally, the tribal people and the indigenous people came to them and they said, look, if you build them a little house on the highway so they have a place to go to get away from the highway, they'll be happy. So they built this little house, and the highways never had another problem. So, and I got that story and that whole line of thinking a year ago. They're building a Mexican railway somewhere, and the workers refused to work in this one section because they were taking pictures of the alux in the trees. And so the president of the country came out and he did a speech, and he said, we're reworking this. We're not going to go through what is their territory. And so they were able to finish building their railroad. So there's a whole lot, and the alux tend to congregate at vortices in the ley lines. Now, the first time I became extremely aware of the ley lines was I was watching Rory Duff be interviewed by Pam Gregory, and it was almost 4 years ago. And it's right after we'd all been locked down, and everybody was like, where did all this come from? And I was listening to Rory Duff because he's the geobiologist, and he was talking about how they had expected there to be people that study the things he studies had expected there to be a great change in how whole world was going to work, because starting in 2017, our part of the galaxy rotated away from a place where it had been protected by energetic clouds, and we were not getting nearly the number of neutrinos. All of a sudden, the number of neutrinos just spiked because we no longer had this protective shield. And that was a shield for the whole galaxy. We have our own uh, lines that keep the energy out. If we didn't have that shield around us, we'd be burnt up by the rays of the sun, at least as we are configured now. So he said, but he said they had expected this to happen because he was a geologist first before he became a biogeologist, and in the rocks. Now this means that these neutrinos that are hitting us are enough to leave changes in the rocks. It happens about every 13,000 years. So you go 13,000 years back, dig around the rocks, you're going to find layers that have this show this extra bombardment. You go back 26,000 years. You go back you keep going back and back and back, and they had expected this, but they didn't know exactly how it happened because everybody who'd been recording science had been protected by that cloud also. So that started it. That started my looking at energies coming from outer space and then how they affect the energy lines here. And ever since 2017, when they became aware of this, those people who measure ley lines were out measuring their width and their strength. And they will, and so they started recording it. And these guys go out every day and measure the ley lines that are near them. I am not nearly as anal as that. I'm not going to do that. But they say if you measure it, you can see the ley lines wave a little bit. They move back and forth. But at the equinoxes and at the solstices, they become stick straight. And that's why I always go out on the equinox and talk to, and the solstices and talk to Hogarth. And did I show you a picture? I have a picture of Hogarth. This is my tree. Now, how do I know it's a ley line tree? See all the little lumps and bumps on it? They're called burls. And this I took on the day that I finally realized. I said, okay, you're covered with burls, but how is the ley line? That happens to trees that the ley lines run right underneath because there's so much extra energy coming out of the earth that's how the tree expresses the excess growth. And I couldn't figure out which way was, even with my dowsing stuff, I really couldn't do it. And so I walked out one day to look at it, and all of a sudden there was this trail that you can see around the tree, underneath the tree, and back of the tree, except it was right when we'd had a snap freeze. And there was this yellow, it was literally the yellow brick road. And I went, is that your ley line? And by this time, Hogarth was talking to me, and he said, yes. And I will tell you, the first times I walked on the ley line, because I followed it down to see, there's a whole string of trees in this green space. And I walked that ley line, and by the time I got to the edge, my knees were weak, and Hogarth said, get off the ley line. You're pulling in all the energy. You're pulling in energy from it. And so I got off the ley line, and I came home and took a big nap. And I realized that in order for me to find a ley line, they had to draw it on the ground, put out my yellow brick road. But since then, I've talked to Hogarth about the elementals, and the elementals, fairy sprites, all those critters, they use these ley lines to travel around the world. And the world uses them as a way to communicate. It's Gaia's nervous system. So Rory Duff now. Rory kept following it, and one of the things they began to notice in his group that monitors these really closely is that they get stick straight on the solstices. Well, that was years ago. Now they not only are stick straight on the solstices, but they're growing. and growing and growing. And he was talking about ley lines is kind of the universal term, and that's what they started calling them. They also have dragon lines, which are really big, powerful lines, and they go across the U.S. I mean, they go across the whole world. And we've gotten 2 or 3 years ago, we got 2 more dragon lines. They just appeared, and when they were out there measuring it, they realized they were there, and one came out of California, out of the ocean, just north of San Francisco, and it runs pretty much straight line to Wisconsin, to a place called Holy Hill, which it was a holy hill for the Indians. But when the Catholic priests got there, they said, "Oh, this looks like a nice place for a cathedral." So they have a whole cathedral on there, and it's supposed to be. Now, I know a reader who went over there. He said he didn't find anything at the cathedral, but when he was walking up the hill, he definitely hit a spot that struck him as having a lot of power. So this is what kind of ley lines are doing. They're growing, they're straightening, and they're getting ready for the changes that we're going through this spring, which is why I went there. And I did post in my notes, and I know Sharon's put it in several times. Rory Duff just did another interview with Heather Ensworth, and his people don't measure these ley lines. They meet at the ley lines on the solstices, on the equinoxes, or just occasionally just to stand around them and see what they can all feel. And he's talked about the great changes he sees coming. He talks with somewhat of hope. Now, I'm going to tell you, Rory Duff is an Englishman, and I've had people who are born in this country who don't think he's the most dynamic of people. I think his information is incredibly dynamic. So go watch the show, because what he talked about is, where's Holy Hill? Holy Hill's in Wisconsin. And he talks about the changes they are beginning to feel are coming, and why is the earth solidifying itself so much for this. And so all I can tell you is that I believe that all of these extra solar flares that we're going through, the big hum that's coming from the edge of the universe, that they believe is 2 black holes circling each other to join together. I don't know what's going to happen when that happens. But I follow things about all kinds of energetic waves and movements. I watch astronomers as well as astrologers on YouTube, and I try to keep up with that and see if it correlates with what I'm feeling. But one of the things that Rory talked about in this tape with Heather Ensworth was how some people who were very sensitive and were being tied in to this information had a really rough winter. And until the equinox on the 19th of March, they were really, really feeling down, feeling great amounts of despair, because what they now have meditated in is that the biggest problem in our world is polarity. And anybody watches 5 minutes of the news, that's the truth. But that's not the problem. The problem is that we've let ourselves be conned into this polarity, and it's a time when we should be stepping back, and instead of seeing everything as black and white, just seeing them as being reflections of each other. And it makes it harder to condemn something when you don't put a hard edge on it. And he talks about the timing in this thing, and I've read about it before, of the timing of when Jesus came. And for a brief window there, he was telling people, this is how you need to all get along. And then the superstructure, the power, the corporate power of the Catholic Church got a hold of it. And so you can, and he speaks very eloquently about what we need to do. And I have a great graphic, and I'm going to save it, show it to you when I can figure out how to blow it up really big enough to see on your screen. But it's a shark that's being swallowed up by schools of fishes. The schools of fishes have created a bigger fish than the shark. And that's what he's talking about. When we begin to understand that by controlling our own power and not tying into the anger and the fear and the frustration, but trying to open our energy out enough to understand all that's going on around us. And the planet right now, with the way it's sending energy through the ley lines, is really pushing each and every one of us to be able to get to that way. So this whole thing started because it was supposed to be a show about Hogarth, and I've been writing down lots of his things because I went out to see him on the equinox in March, and he had a few little green sprouts on him. And when I'd seen him before, he was like this. It kind of grows all up and down his trunk. And I said, you just have a couple of them, and the whole rest of his trunk, they were just little brown sticks, and they were breaking off, and it was looking sort of pitiful. And I said to him, when do you get green? And he said, come back and see me tomorrow. So I went back the next day, and I didn't have my camera with me, and 3/4 of his trunk was green. And I looked at him, and I said, okay, that's a big change. And when I was walking back to, I said, that's really fast for change. And Hogarth let me know that that's the change that's coming. And I said that, and it struck me because I'm like, that fast? We're going to all figure out how to make ourselves better and how to show who we really are. And he said, just that fast. So that's what my notes to how to what's coming up, and he said, well, we're in the middle of the eclipse. I mean, we're going to have almost as much totality as you can. I think we miss it by 13 seconds or something, total of the eclipse. So I was eagerly writing away in my little notebook about thoughts from Hogarth, and I do it by doing automatic writing. I just let it go and let Hogarth come talk to me. Sometimes he'll talk to me when I'm cooking in the kitchen, but normally he does it that way. And I had a lot of notes, and I was getting them all ready yesterday, and he said, no. Those are human words. They can't begin to express what's going on here. And so I said, okay, what do I do? And he told me to go back and use a technique called neurographic painting. It's where you blank your mind out, you draw lines all over the page, and you start filling it in with color, and you see what you produce. And I have a whole box full of them. Oops. That's not the one. Wait a second. I should have had this better organized. Story of my channel. Okay. This is the kind of things you produce. And then you look at it and you say, you kind of pick out shapes and forms and colors. But it's very soothing. And if you're a very confusing point in your life, I just do them because I like to do them while I'm watching TV. But I have a whole box full below me. And he said, you're going to draw. And I said, I've been trying to paint him. He won't let me paint. I mean, my mind won't let me paint him. But he said, you're going to draw. So I ended up drawing this, which is possibly very meaningless to everybody else who's watching this. But this part is Hogarth. These are little green things that are growing on him. And this is the ley line below him. This is how it passed. That's how the energy moves through him. And this is the grassy part. And then we go up into the sky. And when I was going up into the sky, he said, get out the circles. And I have a template that does circles. And I said, why? And he said, just get out the circles and start drawing the circles on here. And I said, okay. And so I drew the circles, and then I was told to fill them in with various colors and various shapes and have the lines cross across them differently. And I said, why? And he said, well, that's the moons I see. And I said, Hogarth, there's only one moon. And he said, no, every single moon is its own new thing. And you need to understand that. And this is all the different ways that Hogarth sees the moon as he stands out on the edge of the creek. And so I pulled it up this morning because I did it late last night. And I wonder what it's going to look like. But I'm really happy with it because that is the kind of energy I feel coming out of the earth. And that is, it's not the world's greatest representation of Hogarth, but it will do. But what fascinated me was he allowed me, he said, if you had to stand still in one place on the earth and look up, it's not one moon, it's many moons. And every single one of them is unique unto itself. And that's why he wanted me to paint them all different colors and split them up. And okay. What I figured out today is that it is the reason that I don't read on certain topics, because they are so polarizing. They put you here and them there. And I've always believed that there was a way we could all, and I don't care how evil they are, and I've talked to some pretty evil people, that there's a way to at least understand their point of view and quit being so hard. Well, I'm not like that, because I know that circumstances being different, I could be very much like that, very much like some of those people. And apparently that's from what Rory Duff's is telling us is the message we need to have now. We need to let go of the polarity, because the polarity is the way we connect to energy to say we're right and they're wrong. Now, I talk to a lot of people who think I'm crazy because I talk to trees. They think I'm crazy because I have a dragon named Cecil. And it's really a matter of us opening ourselves up. And here, I like this comment from Lori. I love the yellow. I keep seeing many shades of yellow in my meditations. I'm going to embrace the yellow as the galactic energies, which is what they are. And they're coming, guys. There's going to be no way you're not going to be able to feel them. But if you can walk this, where is it? Find the commonalities and walk the middle path. That's what I think ultimately Hogarth's been trying to teach me how to do. I learned from talking to the elementals that I've spoken with, they're going to become more a part of our world this year. That means little fairy folks. And I learned that elves are really very tall people. And I'm 5'4", and they're taller than me, most of them. And they are, they also want balance, because the reason they had to leave the earth and go into hiding to the place that I met them, they're on the planet, they're in the planet. And the reason that they're there is because people turned from them. There was a time when people could accept or not accept it. They could all have their feelings about it, but there was not, if you don't believe what I believe, I'm going to hurt you. Anyway, yes, let go of polarity, because that is the end of all things. But in space between 2 points, who can say which one begins and where the other ends? And that's true. And that's what you see in the seed of life. Everything's interconnected. And so when you're rejecting them, you're rejecting parts of yourself. Oh, they get in. I tell you what, the elementals are the closest to us temperamentally, I think, in the universe. From everything I hear about people who really deal with intergalactic beings, they're not the same way we are. But the Fae and they have just enough human traits that they do take on their own kind of vengeance. But they can also teach us that that's not a good thing to do. Anyway, what can we do to welcome them with respect? Um, Acknowledge that they're here. I mean, one of the reasons they went away, according to, uh, I read a book, and it was a guy's Oxford thesis. It was published in 1917, and he went all over the Celtic world and interviewed people that had who understood the myths and legends, and to find out what had happened. And one of the things he said was, when people began to work not the land anymore, because when you work the land, you can feel the people there. You can feel the and other energies there. And it's when people no longer work the land and they did things like built highways straight across Ireland, when the people said, no, 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 you're building that in a fairy ring. You don't want to do that. Eventually, the British came back. They built it in the 60s. In the 80s, they came back and rerouted that road because that had the single highest number of accidents in the British Isles. So, they don't like being disrespected, and they will make sure that they won't be. But how can we respect them, acknowledge them? And if you plant a garden, put things out for them, put stones out, ask them to come in, tell them you're listening to them, and then listen to them when they tell you, oh, you shouldn't have put that plant next to that plant. There's a place in Scotland, and I've done a show about this one too. It's called Findhorn, and they publish. You can go on their website and get a weekly meditation from them. They're wonderful. They're beautiful, and it was a piece of land in northern Scotland. And if you've never been to northern Scotland, it's very stark. It's very rocky. It's not a great place to grow anything. And this couple ended up sort of being stranded up there with their sons and another woman who's a friend of theirs. They lost their jobs. And they talked to this farmer, and he said, well, if you can get anything to grow on, it literally is a spit of land that goes out of the ocean, which means it gets all that salt water and stuff too. And the two women began to understand that they were being told how to farm the land. And it is one of the most productive farms in the world for the size, space, and everything it has. There's now a thing called the Findhorn Foundation. And this isn't like from year. This started in the late 60s. And they now are a branch. They go and they teach their understanding of nature to people all over the world under the UN auspices to improve farming. So, anyway. Yeah. Okay. Another Beatle fan. Love it. I see everything is interconnected, and I am he, and you are me, and I am we, and we are all together. Cuckoo, cuckoo. That's true. I love you guys because you get all the references I make from my youth. You can also acknowledge them. They'll send you critters to give you messages. The first time when I got kidnapped by Cecil and was told that and it came back, and they basically said, well, now you know, and they waved at me as I left this sort of Middle Earth kind of fairy party place. And I woke up the next morning and I said, I can't go on YouTube and talk about riding around on a dragon, and they're going to take me away. So I got up and I just said, no, I'm not going to do it. And then I got in my car to drive around, and the symbol of my business is the dragonfly, which is like the dragonfly that's surrounded by stones behind me. I got a little dragonfly bracelet from a friend yesterday. It's so cute. And I looked out my driver window to the side, and there was a solid gold, big dragonfly right next to the window of my car hovering. And I live near a creek, but I don't live in the kind of environment that produces dragonflies. It produces different things, but not dragonflies. And I looked at it, and I went, "You're not going to go away until I do this, are you?" And the dragonfly when I pulled out to start driving to where I was going, got right in front of my car. And he didn't go away. He was right in the middle of my windshield until I said, "Okay, I'll do it. I'll figure out a way to do it." And I did it with a lot of, and I had the oddest incident that happened after that was, where is he? Okay, this is my dragon, Cecil. And the way I got a picture of Cecil was I was talking to another uh, psychic kind of person. Well, it was Dr. Gale. I don't know if you call what she does. She's psychic, but anyway, she had a friend who had sent her this drawing 3 days before I got kidnapped. And her friend said, "Gail, I don't know what this is, but this is not the kind of art this woman does at all." And she said, "I don't know what this is." And I had just told Gail, when I told Gail about the dragon, she said, "Oh, I've seen him." And I went, "What do you mean you've seen my dragon?" I didn't know I had a dragon until a couple days ago. And then I don't have the portal. Um, the woman also sent Dr. Gale a picture of the portal that I went through to get to where the fairies are. And the reason they brought me in is because of the 9 candle ceremony I do. They said, "You understand ritual." And for the person who said, "How can I get in touch with them?" Plant it in your mind. If you'll tell me what I need to do, then I will be glad to accommodate. And I think uh, you can start to relate. Now you can go out and talk to a tree; they'll talk back. I know that for a fact. And then have to be a ley line tree. I just happen to have a lumpy, bumpy ley line tree, and you'll, and then and most of us don't know how to work with a shaman because we don't really understand what they do. Even if you live in the world I live in, we don't really know how to work with shamans. But shamans have a lot of understanding of these different levels of energy. And I think shamans are going to become much more popular people to follow. I kind of consider, in a way, although he would never admit it because he's a geobiologist, but I think Rory Duff's a shaman. And I definitely know Hamish was a shaman. And you can call them plant whisperers, you can call them pet whisperers, and, you know, whatever. There's a Shah woman in our chat today. I'm glad you're here. Um, but open your mind up to it and don't think it was just a little flicker out of the side of your eye. I'm going to tell you though, working with fairies, it's tough. They're very mischievous. They're like working with 4-year-olds. And I'll have something all planned out. As a matter of fact, I went looking for 2 of my books yesterday to do the show, and I cannot find a book. And I know exactly where I put it. For sacred geometry, it's gone, and I know I'll find it tomorrow. I lost a deck of cards for about a week, and I finally told my daughter I'm going nuts. She took my whole office apart. She said, "I don't know where they are, Mom. You must have stuck them in a bag and taken them somewhere." And the next morning, when I was up getting my breakfast, I came back. I go from my bedroom to the kitchen through my office. And as I was coming back out from my office, my daughter and I had been in the kitchen discussing the missing cards. I said, "Casey, come here and look." And there was the deck, just right smack dab in the middle of the walkway. So it hadn't been there when I went to get breakfast, but it was when I came out. So I'm just telling you, they're lots of fun. You just can't let them get to you. And they like rituals. So if you have things you do on a routine basis, like Terry with holding your space, she does a lot of meditations and different things. Fall into those practices, because those are the practices that are going to help tear us down so that we can be the little fish swimming to eat up the shark instead of being the little fish swimming away from the shark to not be eaten. And unless you guys have a question, which you better type pretty quickly, this is all I've been doing for the last, well, except for being on with Terry. Terry hit me with the light subject. She sends me a note. Do you think we could look at universal light and the golden sun? So I kind of had a feeling that was a big topic. And I looked at it. And when I met up with her on Monday morning, I said, girl, have you looked how, I mean, we could do this for the next year. And so what we're trying to do, and this is the message I keep giving, is it's down to each and every one of us to figure out what our role is in this and to individuate the information. I get a lot of information from people like Rory Duff and other people who work in that field, and Hamish Miller and Tim Walters. Lots of fun to talk to. As a matter of fact, I belong to his little private group of people that he has to talk with him. But all those guys can tell me 100 things, but the only things it's the things I choose to hang on to. It's the things you choose to hang on to. That's why I talk about so much crazy stuff. And we haven't even gotten to the fact that I believe that all the rocks are alive. I believe the whole planet's alive. And I believe if Gaia really wanted to get rid of us, she could shake us off like fleas. So that's been kind of, I haven't talked to Johan in a while. He's the South African who goes around the world and reconnects ley lines so that we'll be all connected. Okay. Sure. Go out and talk to him. Just sit. If sit in a chair, I don't know where you live, so I can't tell you what to do on your porch, but go talk to him. Believe me, this eclipse is going to, especially if you live in the U.S., it's going to really open up a lot of doors. It's also going to open up a lot of other things, but okay. But that's Deanna. That's how I'd suggest you do it. If I think of something else, maybe Hogarth will give me some other info. Oh, they're all the gnomes, the elves, and the fairies. They're all their own thing, and you got to realize they're based out of a different sets of beliefs. Elves are very fundamental. If you've ever listened to or read a book about elves, they come out of their. That's what we call them in our world, but there are elves in every culture. There are, like the Aluxa, that's in Mexico. That's a fairy. It also acts a lot like an elf and a gnome. No, Cecil doesn't tell me why the dragons now. I don't know, but I heard one person who was channeling in elemental energy, and he said that was an old legend, and I did find references to it, that this is the year 2024 and 2025 are when the dragons are going to fly off the walls, which if I was in China, that would give me reason to think. Okay. Deanna Quinn, yes, one is it? Yep, they like pretty stones. Yes, those are the little people in Hawaii. And when you get to some cultures, they don't split them up into fairies, gnomes, elves. And yet in Greek culture, they did. They had nymphs were the ones that had to do with water. And they had another name for the elves things. You can ask them back. That trust me. Let's see. Oh, Pudwudgies. Yes, Pudwudgies are what the indigenous Americans believed in. And I stayed at a friend's apartment, and it was an old apartment. It had been built in the 1920s. And it had a big courtyard out back. And I kept telling her that I kept hearing bells all night ring. I said, do you have like a wind chime somewhere? And she goes, no, that's the little guys. And they walked through her apartment. Nice of her to tell me that. I was in the room they walked through. Oh, this is cool. And it's not cool that you're in chemo, but she's looking at a beautiful, it's in the oncology lab, and it has a fairy garden with gnomes and whirligigs and elementals. That's that's what they're there doing. They're trying to bring in all the good energy to help all of you heal. Oh, oil painter, redheaded Menahuni? I'm not sure. My parents lived in Hawaii. I never did learn how to say the words right. Okay. Okay. The eclipse on 8/8 will have the energies that are going to be bringing healing to the corpus callosum in the area of our brains. It's a groove that's between the right and left hemispheres. Very exciting. I hope so. My brain can use all the help it can get. Um, and so, anyway, and Tina and oil painter are deciding whether they've been telling each other all the legends they know. But that's kind of my summary of we're beginning to look at Hogarth, so be watching, because a week from now I will have already been through the eclipse, which ought to be all kinds of fun. And by the way, I live in such a strange state. Well, y'all knew that. I live in Texas. But they're having news stories. For months they've had, oh, get ready for the eclipse, invite your best friends, we're going to da-da-da-da-da. And all of a sudden, this week, they're running news stories like, make sure you've backed up your groceries and make sure you get gas in your car. And I mean, that's what they say when we have really bad weather coming. And then when they were talking about, they made it sound like these visitors were going to run through our grocery stores and strip it like a bunch of army ants. Anyway, that's not going to happen. Linda Bishop. In 1980s, my son and I had a duplex in Texas. We had gnomes and little fairy guys. Stuff disappears and comes back. It's cool. That's true. There's a lot of Texas that has a lot of indigenous things left. And I'm glad I made your heart happy. And shaman woman, if you can find my email in, I can put it up. Actually, I have that one. If you would like to contact me, I'd like to talk to you about what you do and why you got that name. And see, because I believe shamans are going to be, Danny Shea's one too. And I believe that they're going to be the people we need more of. And I think they do what they do, but they don't want to use those kind of words because people kind of look at you funny. I've been being looked at funny since 1961 when I started reading tarot cards, guys. And I was looked at funny before then. I just didn't know why. And I want everyone to appreciate the gorgeous bluebonnets that are behind me. I'm going to see if I can make me little, I can't make me absent, but I want you to appreciate how gorgeous those bluebonnets are. They are absolutely magnificent, and they are out. And if you're driving through Texas now, this is a good time for the eclipse to have come. People can get their bluebonnet pictures taken because every Texan I know runs out and gets their picture taken with bluebonnets. I don't, because there's a pollen around them that really triggers me off. And I hope all of you have a lovely, healing, wonderful day, and think happily about the upcoming eclipse. I know we're in like a rough month. We have every planet crossing every planet, going on top of every other planet. And if you listen to the astrologers, it's a very confusing month, but it shouldn't be confusing for us. Yeah, Tina, it's the bluebonnets. This is a bad time of year for allergies. You can go on and enjoy yourselves and understand that change is coming that's going to really, really be positive for us. Yeah, that happens right next to my natal sun. Thank you. No. The thing about knowing astrology and those sorts of things is you can figure out how to work with them. Well, have a wonderful day, everybody, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.